Hello and welcome to the Undisputed MMA show presented by the FTN Network. My name is Jonah Shiffman. I'm joined, as always, by John Kelly. We're going to be breaking down UFC Vegas 32 going down this weekend at the Apex facility. We got 12 fights on deck, including a really awesome main event between Corey Sandhagen and former champion TJ Dillashaw returning after a 2-year suspension. John, this looks to be a pretty dope card. I mean, the main event is high level for a fight night at this point. And then just kind of throughout the card, there's a few middle welterweight fights that look really good. I'm certainly excited for this weekend. I'm looking forward to it. How are you doing? And what are your general thoughts on the card before we get started here?
Yeah, this honestly has pay-per-view vibes to me. I am very excited. This is the most excited I've been for a free non-pay-per-view card in a while. I have Sandhagen, who's always been one of my favorite fighters. That's an awesome main event matchup, like you said. We have Brendan Allen, Punahele Soriano, two guys that I've been higher on historically. I'm excited to see them bang it out. Miranda Maverick versus Maycee Barber. That's going to be a banger. There's just so many fun matchups up and down the card, and a lot of decent prop spots, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, I'm really excited for Saturday. I think this one is not going to disappoint us.
Yeah, for sure. And we have 12 fights. Hopefully everything stays intact. We're actually recording live. So shout out to anyone tuning in midday on a Thursday right now. So there's 12 fights. Hopefully they all stay intact tomorrow throughout weigh-ins. But if they do, it's shaping up to be a pretty good, I think, DFS card. 12 fights is always a good amount to have. And then we mentioned the individual fights in terms of not only betting, because I don't have a ton of bets so far on the card, but just in terms of entertainment value. This is a really high-level card, and we should make the most of it because I took a look ahead to next weekend, and it is not nearly the same offering as we do have coming up on Saturday. So without further ado, let's get it started here, John. We have a women's fight to kick off the night. We got Hannah Goldy and Diana Belbita. They're a pick'em fight, -110 apiece here. Goldy came into the UFC, won on Contender Series, lost her debut. Belbita came back in her first fight, and her first UFC fight, got mauled by Molly McCann, then get armbarred by Liana Jojua. However, it seems like a lot of sharp money has hit Belbita throughout the week. She opened as a decent underdog. Hannah Goldy has come down from about a -140 favorite to the -110 range. I don't have a ton of takes on this fight. To me, it just feels like a low-level women's MMA fight between two women who probably don't belong in the UFC. Belbita is kind of known for her armbar as a finishing move. Theoretically, she like to pull guard and shoot and go for the armbar. Hannah Goldy, theoretically, is a boxer. I don't think she's very good at it. It just feels like it's a close fight. -110 apiece seems right. If you got in on Belbita at +130, +140, you probably got the best of the number, and so good for you on that. But it's not a fight that I'm looking to get involved with, and probably a pretty easy pass for DFS. I mentioned 12 fights. This one is significantly favored to go the distance. I don't see either fighter having a ton of a wrestling or grappling upside, which we know scores a ton of points in the current DK scoring system. So it's pretty much a pass on all fronts for me. Do you have anything here in our first fight of the night?
Yeah, not really much to add from me. I think, like you said, this is a pretty easy stay away in terms of DraftKings. The ceiling on either fighter, just even in a win, Goldy probably wins a striking-based decision, which maybe she reaches 100 significant strikes. It's not going to score well. Belbita, theoretically would have some grappling upside maybe, but, she's somebody who we give Jordan Wright, the Beverly Hills Ninja, we give him a lot of shit, and some other guys in the past, about having a super padded regional record. If you go back and watch Belbita, or even look it up on Tapology or SureDog or whatever, she literally fought all 0-0, 0-4 fighters leading up to the UFC, and now she's just basically been exposed because, like you said, she's probably not UFC level. So this is literally the bottom of the barrel. In my opinion, I don't think either of them really have much of a future in the promotion. And I just, I guess coming into the matchup, I was Goldy's a sizable favorite, Belbita +160. I was a little bit tempted, but then I'm what am I doing? I can't even do it. And now, it's a pick 'em. Like you said, that's probably where it should be. I could see it going either way. I just don't think the upside is really there for either fighter in terms of DFS. And there's just a lot of other good spots to get my money in terms of props and betting. So this was an easy pass for me.
Yep, fair enough. Let's move on to our second fight of the night. We're going to stick in the women's divisions. We're going to 125 pounds here. We got Sijara Eubanks coming down from 135. She originally started her career at 125, but she's going back down after spending a bunch of time up at bantamweight. She's minus 355, large favorite this weekend. $9,300 on DK for Eubanks against Elise Reed, who makes her UFC debut on relatively short notice here. She's plus 290 underdog, $6,900 on DraftKings. And I'll go first here. This is the only play that I have like real conviction behind so far this week in terms of in the betting markets. I'm on Sijara Eubanks big. I bet her at minus 290 straight for a unit on FanDuel. I also bet the under 2.5 rounds at plus 210 on the open. That's come down quite a bit. And then I took a little bit of Eubanks submission plus 500 today on FanDuel Sportsbook. That number is still up there. In terms of how these two break down, I mentioned it a little bit in the intro to this fight. Eubanks was fighting at 135 and she struggled to make 125 before, but she's coming down in weight and she was a good grappler at 135 pounds. She has a strong top control game. She's a good wrestler. I know her MMA record is 6-6 or 7-6, but to me, Eubanks is way better than her record indicates. And she's been fighting women pretty much at the top of her division for a long time. And that's not saying she's always been in title contention, although she was at the very beginning of her UFC run. It's more so like she's been fighting top 10 girls. And with Elise Reed, she comes in, she's 28 years old. So it's not like there's a ton of room for like massive improvements as a super young prospect, but she's a 115er who actually began her career at 105 pounds at bantamweight, which we don't even have in the UFC. So she's just extremely undersized against Eubanks. And from what I've seen, she has kind of a karate style on the feet, but she's a pretty terrible grappler. You go back and watch her fight against Hillary Rose, who she beat in her last time out. And I know who Hillary Rose is because I bet on her in the Contender Series, and she was pretty much awful. She lost to Cheyenne Buys, who I actually thought was going to be good, and then I bet on in her debut and lost. So basically, the moral of the story is if you ever see me betting on a low-level women's fight on the Contender Series, somebody please take all of my accounts away. But Hillary Rose is no good, and she was mounting Elise Reed. She got into dominant positions. You go back and watch Elise Reed's other fights. In almost every fight, she ends up on bottom in some sort of compromised position, and she gets away with it because she has a ton of output on the feet, or she'll strike from the bottom. And like she's had close one decisions where it was because she was doing like damage from the bottom type of deal. But every time she gets on top, she gets threatened by an armbar or something like that. And some of them are not super high percentage submissions. Like I don't really fault her for being on top and almost getting caught because her submission defense is decent, but she's going in there with a different level of fighter in Sijara Eubanks. I think Eubanks is a better striker. She's way bigger. She's 100% a better grappler. And I know she does not have a UFC finish yet in her career, but she's going to get to a dominant position. And Eubanks has some grappling credentials outside of the UFC, just in terms of pure grappling. And I really think that she gets to a dominant position and comes away with her first submission win of her career this weekend. There's some worry in my head that she gets on top and just smashes her and gets the KO, but I have the under at plus 210. I feel really good that Eubanks goes out there and she just straight handles business. I know Sijara is a flawed fighter. Her cardio is not great. She certainly let us down in the past, but if she can't get past Elise Reed, then my hand will be up and I'll be completely wrong because I think this is a mismatch of epic proportions. So I'm on the Sarge pretty big here, John. Am I crazy? People are telling me I'm crazy. I'm laying 3-1 on this girl who has terrible cardio. She continuously lets us down. Am I crazy, or do you think she also gets the job done this weekend?
Yeah, I'm right there with you, buddy. I think Sijara Eubanks rolls in this spot. The only bet I have is the submission prop that you have as well. Shout out to you for that one. Half a unit for me at plus 500. Like you said, she hasn't won by submission, but it's not because she's a bad grappler. Like she's had opportunities. It's just she's fighting against other women that are capable grapplers. And that's not what this is. Like this matchup is literally, I'm pretty sure Reed is in the military. I could be wrong on that. And MMA is just this side thing that she does. She's not even she's not nearly on the level that you need to be fighting in the UFC. And so obviously she takes a short notice replacement fight where she's up a weight class, Sarge coming down a weight class. She's going to be way bigger, way stronger, and a much better grappler. Sure, she can finish by ground and pound as well. Like you said, maybe if she gasses out just holds on, wins a decision. But even in that scenario, she's a pretty decent DraftKings play because I just think the takedowns are super likely, the control time, and I'm with you. I think she finds a submission victory here. So yeah, I mean, I know people probably aren't going to want to pay for Sijara being the most expensive fighter on DraftKings this week because of those flaws that she has. But this matchup is like, I mean, it is so beyond lopsided that it's like, it shouldn't even really be sanctioned. Like, it's just, I think she dominates here. Pepe Silva in the chat says, why not just smash Eubanks inside the distance? Yeah, so Jonah did. Me, I just took the submission prop at plus 500. I think that's probably the most likely outcome here. But yeah, I mean, I guess she could win a decision too. I don't know. Would you be shocked if she just won a dominant decision?
I mean, no, not at all. She's never finished someone before, but it's a matter of like, would I be shocked? No, but it's also, we're getting plus money. I think Eubanks inside the distance is plus 160. So I probably would have bet that. So what I bet is I bet the under 2.5 for 3/4 of a unit. And then I put the other quarter on submission, 5-1. So the over under market opened up first, which is why I bet that, because plus 210 was just wild. I mean, now Eubanks is inside the distance line, it's plus 160. So I have the fallback that like if Reed finishes in the first 12.5 minutes, I win the under. To be clear, I do not think that will happen. I will win a bet and be very wrong at the same time if that were to happen. But I think Eubanks inside the distance is fine. I just like the number on submission because I don't think she's going to hurt her on the feet necessarily. And I think the ground is the biggest mismatch. But, you know, sometimes you get to the point where someone is such a bad grappler that it's like 50-50 whether they get submitted or just pounded out. So, yeah, I think Eubanks could win by TKO positionally on the ground for sure. So I don't hate playing her inside the distance. I'll be happy if she wins by KO. If she wins by decision, I break even. I think she gets the finish here, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if Eubanks goes and just like dominates her 30-27, 30-26 sort of deal in that realm. We have anything to add there for Eubanks, John, or you want to move on to our third fight?
The last thing I'll say, because I didn't even really talk about Reed much other than saying it's lopsided, is like she's not even a grappler. Like she's a one-dimensional striker, and she's shown like okay first level takedown defense on the regional scene. But against a girl like Sijara Eubanks, I think she cuts right through on the mat. Like she's not a grappler whatsoever. So I think it's pretty clear we both see that as the most likely outcome in this fight.
Yeah, agreed on all accounts. Let's move on to our third fight of the night. We got Julio Arce. He's minus 200, $9.1 thousand against Andre Ewell, who comes back plus 170, 7.1K for Ewell. And John, I'll let you go first here, but let me just tee this up real quick. This is a similar fight to the last one where we actually have Arce moving down in weight. So he's been fighting at 145. He's been fighting at featherweight, coming down to 135 bantamweight for this fight. He hasn't fought in like well over a year at this point. He's had multiple fights canceled. So I'm certainly excited to see Arce back in there, but you are paying an expensive price if you want to back him on the straight money line at minus 200 coming off of a decently sized layoff. So I'll toss it over to you. What do you make of this matchup and the betting odds as well?
Yeah, I do like Julio Arce. I think he's the deserved favorite here, but I think you can make an argument that the line is a little bit wide. And that's kind of surprising coming from me because I'm never been an Andre Ewell guy, but I just see this fight playing out as like a somewhat competitive kickboxing match. You know, Julio Arce, I think he's a former Golden Gloves winner in boxing, but Ewell's obviously a decent boxer as well. He's got those super freakish long arms. So I think both guys are going to have moments on the feet. I think the reason we're seeing Arce with the expensive price tag here is because the grappling, he's levels better than Ewell in the grappling. Grappling has never been Ewell's strong suit. It's just that I don't know if we can bank on Julio Arce to land takedowns here. Not that he can't, but I don't know if he'll even try. Like he's never really been aggressive to get the fight to the ground, even though he does have a decent ground game. So, I mean, I definitely think he should be the favorite here, but I think it plays out more on the feet than you would like to see if you're backing him at the money line. And in terms of DraftKings, I just think there's better fights up and down the card that have more upside. I could see the winner of this fight scoring like 70, low to mid 70s, which just really isn't going to do it for us on this slate. So.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So with Arce, I think what you mentioned about the grappling is what's most important here. I think if he were to proactively grapple, he covers a minus 200 number with relative ease. I mean, Julio Arce is a really well-rounded fighter. He's going to be, I would say he's going to be decently big for the weight class, but you mentioned that Ewell is insanely long at 135 pounds. Like his range is just kind of insane, and he is a former Golden Gloves boxer. He does use his jab well. He utilizes range, fights at his own range pretty decently, at least for the first 10 minutes of the fight. The main knock against Ewell is his cardio falls off an absolute cliff if you make him fight at really any sort of pace. So, I mean, Arce is a massive favorite to win round 3. I think he has upside to be a massive favorite if he grapples. I think rounds 1 and 2 are close, but honestly, if you look at the metrics for Ewell's striking in general, he isn't that great of a striker in terms of the pure numbers. I mean, he gets hit almost as much as he hits his opponents. And part of that is due to the fact that he really gets beat up in third rounds. Like, I think if you were to kind of segment his statistics to just rounds 1 and rounds 2 as one bucket and then put round 3 in another one, I think you're looking at a pretty good striker in rounds 1 and rounds 2. And then towards the end of the fight, I think he might even be below average just because that cardio slows down. So I think Arce wins this fight. I think he has multiple ways to do it. I'm not laying the chalk just because of the whole moving away class a year and a half layoff. And then at the same time, I think rounds 1 and 2 could be decently close. So it's a pass for me here. In terms of DraftKings, I agree with you. Like Arce has grappling upside, but he lands a half takedown for 15 minutes. 30% accuracy. So he's reliable to shoot about 1 takedown per 15 minutes. And unless he gets Ewell out of there on the feet, which I don't really think is going to happen, the fight is minus 200 to go the distance. It's kind of tough to pony up and pay that $9.1 thousand price tag when we do have so many fights that I project to finish inside the distance. So that's just kind of my read on the fight. It's a pass, but I'm definitely looking forward to it. I mean, this is an underrated, pretty competitive high-level fight. So definitely a bunch of those throughout the card I'm looking forward to. Let's move on to our 4th fight of the night. We got Adrian Yanez. He's minus 230 favorite, $9,000 against Randy Costa. Comes back plus 190, 7.2K for Costa. I've gone first on my biggest bet of the night. I know this isn't your biggest bet of the night, John, but you threw up a prop in the free FTN bets tracker that I jumped on as well. So I'm going to let you talk about it and talk to me about this matchup.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I favor Yanez in almost every single area, but my bet is actually on Randy Costa here, just because FanDuel, shout out to FanDuel, you can always count on them to release some crazy prop numbers. That's why I love them over there. And this one, I mean, legitimately makes no sense to me. Randy Costa by knockout is plus 950. So you're telling me he only has a 9% probability to win by knockout in the first round. All of his wins his entire career have come by knockout in the first round. That is literally how he fights. He is very dangerous for about 3 to 4 minutes, and he has a good chance to knock people out. And if he doesn't do that, he gasses out. And we saw in the Brandon Davis fight, he got submitted with no hooks in. Like, he's not a good grappler whatsoever. Adrian Yanez, I think, is a better grappler. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's much more durable, in my opinion, and he has much better cardio. So it's like, I think the money line is about right on Yanez, and that's why I actually, for like the first time in months, I did play a parlay this week, and Yanez is one of those anchors, just because I do think he covers here most of the time. It's just that Costa's win condition is a first round knockout, and at plus 950, I mean, I would literally put it at like plus 450, plus 500 is where it should be. And we're getting plus 950. So it makes no sense not to bet it. So I know you jumped on that as well. It's pretty much just a blind bet at that number, just because I think he hits that win condition at least double what the current line suggests. But overall, I do favor Yanez. I think it's going to be competitive early on. And then if Yanez stays alive, which I think he does, then he takes over later, probably with the striking. I think he could grapple. It's just that I don't know if he will. But either way, I see him taking over late. So this is a good fight to target. And I actually, it's not Yanez in my parlay. It's fight doesn't go the distance at minus 300. Just because I think there's like no shot that we see a decision here because of all those reasons I mentioned. Costa is either winning in the first round or gassing out and probably getting finished in the second or third. So that's how I see the fight playing out. I think we see a finish here. I think more than likely it's the Yanez side, but again, plus 950 for Costa to literally hit his only win condition is a good bet either way.
Yep. So I tailed you on that. Just the basic math. If we assume that the money line here is relatively efficient, they're giving Randy Costa about a 35% chance to win the fight. You go back and look at this guy's record. I mean, this isn't rocket science. He has 7 pro fights. He's won 6 of them. All 6 of them are by knockout in round 1. And 5 of those 6 have come inside the first minute. Like, this is a guy who goes out there and he just swings for the absolute fences. I know some people are saying, we don't know that Costa has terrible cardio for sure. He hasn't really been tested. He moved to Stanford MMA in December of 2020. So that was after his last fight. And all those things are great. But to me, you got to prove it. Like, I'm not convinced that Randy Costa is anything other than a really powerful fighter in the first round until he shows me otherwise. However, that being said, if the Vegas odds give him a 35% implied chance to win, and we cut his career win percentage by KO in round 1 is 100% of his wins have come via that method. If we cut that in half to 50 and we just say, okay, he wins the fight 35% of the time and half of those outcomes are by knockout in round 1, that's like a 18% outcome is knockout in round 1. And we're getting almost 10-1 on that at FanDuel. It's surely worth a bet to me. So I got down what FanDuel let me. They limited me, so I couldn't get down as much as I wanted, but I just bet it at a few books. I think I have a consensus line of like plus 944 or something on Costa to win by knockout in round 1. That line it's pretty out there. Like people, there are multiple books where you can see that. And that's how I approach the fight. I think he probably loses. I think variants of the under 2.5 at like minus 175 are also decent. You mentioned you're playing the fight doesn't go. I think Yanez is a pretty good striker. His distance management is decent. He's decently hittable. I would say like he gets hit for sure. But his offensive game is he's pretty precise, good sniper. I like his striking game, and I think he's a pretty durable fighter. He's never been finished, but with a guy like Costa, if he's going to come out swinging for the fences for the first 3 minutes and you're giving me 9.5-1 on it, I'm going to take the shot every time. So I think Yanez gets the victory. I think it's probably by finish, but I do think that Costa has a chance to get him out of there early. Regardless of who you pick, I think both sides warrant some recognition on DraftKings and should take up a decent amount of your ownership on the slate. Let's move on to our next fight. We got Ian Heinisch, minus 150, $8.5 thousand against Nassourdine Imavov, who comes back plus 140, 7.7K. John, coming into the week, I was thinking, Ian Heinisch has only really been fighting kind of the best of his division. I know he went out there and got worked by Kelvin Gastelum, and we make fun of Kelvin Gastelum, but like KG's pretty good. Like he's been in there with Israel Adesanya and Robert Whittaker, and Heinisch went out there and lost him, and there's no real shame in that. And then we have Imavov, who I haven't been that impressed with throughout his UFC career. I mean, I know he beat up Jordan Williams, and things got kind of sketchy at points during that fight, and Jordan Williams is not a great fighter. He's also on this card. We'll get to him in a bit. But then you look at Imavov, I don't think he's that great. But it's tough for me to lay a minus 150 number or minus 160 at this point almost at some places on Ian Heinisch, who just feels like he's so underwhelming. Like he's an okay wrestler who doesn't wrestle enough, and he's a decent striker, but Imavov might actually be a cleaner striker. So yeah, I think the line is right. I came close to playing Heinisch. I just don't know if I could lay the chalk in this spot. And Imavov, like just looking at his UFC run, like the Williams fight was sketchy. The Phil's Halls fight, he got dominated for like 12.5 minutes. He put it on the guy late. I'll give him credit. But Ian Heinisch has good cardio, decent like cage pushing game. I think he should win this fight, and he probably wins it more than the odds indicate. It's just hard to lay chalk on a guy like Ian Heinisch. But maybe that's just a leak in my game, and I should just be more comfortable with betting a guy with a much better track record who I think has a bunch of skill advantages as well. So I'll toss this one over to you, John. What do you make of Heinisch versus Imavov?
Yeah, I have a lot of the same concerns with Ian Heinisch. He has faced a tough UFC schedule, but I find it hard to justify laying the juice with him here just because, you mentioned the Kelvin Gastelum fight. Obviously, that's not a good look. Getting like Habib style from Kelvin Gastelum, was taken down like 5 or 6 times, dominated in the wrestling. I think people are just expecting him to be able to wrestle here because Phil Hawes was able to have so much success against Imavov, but I respect Phil Hawes, at least in terms of his wrestling. You know, he comes from a high level wrestling background. The dude is a physical freak. And like you said, Heinisch isn't even like overly aggressive with his wrestling anyway. So I don't know. I could just see him. I could see this being a fight where everybody thinks he's going to wrestle, and then it's just a striking match, and everybody's like, what an idiot. Why isn't he shooting for takedowns? Which seems to happen a lot with the UFC, because sometimes coaches just tell their fighters to do different things, even when things seem really obvious to us. But like you said, on the feet, I actually think Imavov might have an advantage. I trust him to be a little bit more active. I don't know if he has as much power as Ian Heinisch, but I do think he can win minutes standing here. And if Heinisch doesn't come in and wrestle heavy, I find it hard to see he pays off that price tag. So I actually lean with the underdog here. It's not a strong take either way. I just think Imavov could win minutes standing. I think he probably has more upside on DraftKings as well, unless we see Heinisch come in and shoot for takedowns regularly. But it's just a spot where he's going to have to prove it to me that he's going to come in with that game plan and then be able to execute it as well. So I'm going to go with Imavov, but like I said, it's not a strong take either way. And before we move on, Pepe in the chat said, how was Imavov born in Dagestan and he can't wrestle? Big advantage on the feet, though. Yeah, I mean, I agree he has an advantage on the feet. I don't know how big it is, but yeah, the defensive wrestling, at least against Phil Hawes, was not a good look. But again, I don't know if we can expect Heinisch to execute a similar game plan.
Imavov's a big guillotine guy. Someone shoots on him, he has like the 10-finger guillotine that like Brian Kelleher uses. He loves going to that. Almost got Jordan Williams in a guillotine like 3 separate times in that fight, and Williams had to keep flopping to his back. So that's kind of his best takedown defense. But yeah, I mean, the wrestling was certainly not a great look against Phil Hawes. I mean, Phil Hawes is a powerful guy, a good high-level wrestler. But it's clear to me that Imavov's best skill set is his striking. So it's a pass for me on this fight. I'm kind of glad that I didn't bet Heinisch earlier in the week, because I was really like strongly considering it. But just, I don't know. It feels like an icky spot. He should win, but he also is going to do things to make it not as easy as it could be. So I'm happy to pass on that situation. Let's move on to our next fight. And this is a great scrap that a lot of people are super excited for this weekend. We got Punahele Soriano versus Brendan Allen at a straight pick'em right now, -110 apiece, closely lined fight. We got Soriano $8,200 on DraftKings. We got Brendan Allen $8K flat. This is an awesome fight. I mean, there seems to be some real divide in the MMA Twitter betting community, those streets. A couple people feeling super strongly about Puna, a couple people feeling pretty strongly about Brendan Allen. I think I kind of have a middling take to some extent. I really do not think that Punahele Soriano has shown us anything to make me think that he's like a legitimate top 15 fighter. In terms of, he's just he hits like a truck. I'll give him credit for that. He comes out firing for sure. Very dangerous in round 1. Out of his 8 fights, 7 of them he's won via knockout in round 1. The only one that he didn't was on the Contender Series that went to a decision against Jamie Pickett. He, I think, has really bad cardio. I mean, our buddy Sean Orr posted a funny picture of Punahele when Dusko Todorovich's mouthpiece came out in his last fight. Puna had his hands on his knees, like already in the middle of the first round, like during a stoppage in the fight. And we always make fun of Sean because Sean hates when guys ride the bike, like do cycling as their form of cardio. So I put out a tweet making fun of Sean earlier this week, but I really think that Soriano is a massive cardio liability. I mean, the guy swings as hard as he can for as long as the fight lasts, and we've only really seen him extended one time. And like I mentioned, that was against Jamie Pickett, who is not UFC level, cannot wrestle, and Soriano was just able to go out and do that. That being said, Brendan Allen is a pretty hittable guy. I mean, he eats punches with his face for sure, but I actually think he's better than the market has in a bunch of spots. I'll give you a shout out, John. You bet him in his last time out when a lot of people were on the other side of that fight against Carl Roberson. Everyone was saying, oh, Roberson, is a way better striker. He's going to box his face off. I've had a ton of success betting Brendan Allen fights before. I believe I had the under in that Roberson fight. Big bet on Sean Strickland against him. I think you need to be a certain type of fighter, as long as you're not like elite, to beat Brendan Allen, because he is a good wrestler and he's a good grappler. At the beginning of his career, he was very much submission over position. And I think he's kind of amended that a little bit. It's funny to say that after he goes out there and gets an ankle lock on Carl Roberson, but he actually stayed in top control and then went for the submission towards the very end of the round. So I think that Allen is good. The issue is it's a tough matchup for him. Like in terms of ceiling in this division, I think Puna is a gassy power puncher with 1 round of cardio and mediocre wrestling. To me, he doesn't have the same upside that everyone seems to think. On the other hand, like Brendan Allen needs to work on a striking defense, but he has a legitimate ground game, hits hard on the feet, and throws decent volume. Like I think Allen's ceiling is way higher. Just in terms of a stylistic matchup, I think he gets knocked out in round 1 at a decent clip here. So we see our boy Maddie in the chat, Puna KO inside 3 minutes or Allen round 2. I kind of think that's the way to play it. Like I'm not even going to play Puna round 1 just because I don't like the guy, and I think all of his prices are probably overinflated at this point. But that's probably how he wins. And then you live bet Allen after the first round, or you play. I'm looking for an Allen in rounds 2 or rounds 3 prop. And additionally, the one thing I wanted to mention, John, I know I've been going for a minute. I'll toss it over to you in a second, is DraftKings Sportsbook has this new prop market out called Decision Only, which is basically the opposite of Scorecards No Action, which is like Scorecards No Action means if you go to the scorecards, all your bets get refunded. It's only valid if there's a finish inside of 15 minutes. Decision Only means if there's a finish, then all bets get refunded and your bet only pays out a winner or loser if you go to decision. And to me, it feels like Brendan Allen really shouldn't lose a decision here, right? Like there's no way. I mean, Puna would have to hurt him in the 2nd or 3rd round to win a decision, assuming he wins round 1, because Allen is such a better minute winner, in my opinion, and has a ton of upside for like grapple heavy, just absolute maulings in rounds 2 and round 3, and even round 1. Like I haven't seen anything that makes me think Puna is like able to defend a good wrestler taking him down in bulk. You know what I mean? Like I think that Brendan Allen can get him out of there in round 1. I also don't think it goes to decision. I think playing an under is fine. But if it goes to decision, which is the only way this bet pays out, Brendan Allen at minus 150 seems way short to me, because if this fight does hit the scorecards, there's no way that Allen is only 60% to win. So I'm probably going to bet that. I might bet a version of the under as well. I think this is I feel pretty confident in my reads here. I know it's kind of a lukewarm take with everyone taking one side or the other. I fall on the Brendan Allen side. I'll probably prefer to live bet him as opposed to getting it in pre-flop, but that's just me. I'm curious on your take here, John. Do you have anything in Allen versus Soriano?
Yeah, this one was really tough for me. You know, both of these guys I've pretty much loved ever since Dana White Contender Series, Brendan Allen especially, but Puna, I was on him big in his debut, hit the knockout prop. Like he's been good to me as well. So it's kind of bittersweet to see them booked against each other. And originally I thought I was going to play Allen here, especially he opened as an underdog. But I couldn't do it. And part of me wants to still do it now, but it's kind of interesting. It seems like everybody and their mother is on Soriano now, when I could be wrong. I had a feeling that like everybody was on Dusko in his last fight, and then Soriano won, and now he's like everybody's favorite fighter. But the line has moved in favor of Brendan Allen. So, and we've seen this in multiple Allen fights now where everybody's on the other side and the line moves in favor of Brendan Allen. And, you know, that could be nothing. It could just be noise, but it's just interesting to me. But I do think that outside of the first round, I would favor Brendan Allen much more than a pick'em. So it's kind of tough for me to find an angle there, because like you said, I do think he could get knocked out in the first round at a pretty decent clip, because he is confident in his striking now that he's, you know, put some hands together a little bit. He thinks he's a boxer all of a sudden, which is good that he's improving, but defensively, like even in the Roberson fight, which he came in with a good game plan, looked good, got the takedown, ended up getting a submission. But even in that fight early on, he wanted to strike and he ate a big shot. It was like a left hook or something, but he had a big old welt on his eye. Like he's just very hittable on the feet. And if you get hit by somebody that hits like a Mack truck like Soriano, you're probably going to sleep. So even though he's shown off really strong durability up to this point, I just don't know if he can survive Soriano storm early. But if he does, I would favor him to win the fight. So like you said, I think hopping on him live, if he survives round 1, is probably the best angle in this fight. So I'm kind of like you. I'm kind of, you know, I nothing would really surprise me here. An Allen submission, a Soriano knockout win. I guess a Soriano decision would surprise me, just because I do think he has cardio concerns, but it's not like Allen is like some cardio, war hog either. Like he's looked a little bit tired in some of his fights in round 2. Even in dominant positions, you see him taking big breaths and stuff like that. So I'm not even sure that his cardio is all that much better, but I do agree. I would like to see Soriano get out of the first round and actually look decent against somebody with skills and not Jamie Pickett. So the way I would play this is, if you like Soriano, playing by knockout in round 1, I think it's like plus 400 on FanDuel or something like that. And then if you like the Allen side, wait until after round 1 and then try to bet him live at hopefully a good number. But in terms of DraftKings, I would target both sides of this. If you're playing 10 or more lineups, I would get exposure to this in probably every single one, and maybe like a 6-4 split in favor of Allen, just ever so slightly, because I think his upside is probably more. But I mean, the upside is close, because if Puna wins, it's probably a first round knockout. But yeah, it's definitely a fun fight. It's going to be it's going to score well either way. And before we move on, Pepe in the chat says unpopular, but I've gotten a lot of shit lately about this TJ Dillashaw thing, which I don't think I look anything like him, but apparently multiple other people do. Pepe says Jon looks more like Brendan Allen than TJ Dillashaw. That one is a new. I've never got a Brendan Allen one. I'll have to do like a side-by-side face. I'll get back to you on that. That might be better than the TJ take.
Well, here's the thing about you saying you look like people saying you look like TJ Dillashaw is you just don't, except for that picture you post when you're like, some people have told me I look like TJ Dillashaw. I mean, like, you, first of all, you like do not always have a mustache. You don't always comb your hair over like that. So like, it's clearly like made. And TJ doesn't look like that either. So it's like this one picture of you guys looks like super similar, and it looks like an inverted image the way you formatted it. It's like that picture when you said some people tell me I look like TJ Dillashaw. Like, yeah, you look like fucking TJ Dillashaw on that picture. Like in general, like talking to you, I would never be like, oh yeah, that guy looks like TJ Dillashaw. Brendan Allen's an interesting shout. I don't know if I agree that you look like Brendan Allen.
Maybe if after I do the editing, maybe I'll throw up a Brendan Allen face next to me for YouTube. Yeah, but we'll see. I'll get back to you.
One last thing on this fight before we move on to another good one coming up next. I'm glad you brought up the Brendan Allen durability because it takes a lot, it feels like, to get that guy out of there. I mean, Sean Strickland hits hard and hit him flush like 80 times, no exaggeration, within a couple of rounds in that spot. And Allen has eaten shots in pretty much every one of his fights. And what I always say about durability is it's not something I want to bet on. Like, I'm not betting Brendan Allen because I think he has good durability, but it is a positive to have in your back pocket, right? Like, if you are a grappler first who's facing a guy who's probably going to hit you pretty hard early in the fight, it is nice to know that historically Brendan Allen has had good durability. I mean, it's MMA. He gets hit hard in the chin by a guy who hits like a truck. Anyone could go to sleep. But I do think that Allen has decent durability and could survive down the stretch. We got a comment from Bonquiqui72 in the chat. 145-pound Rory McDonald is what I see. I think everyone's just throwing out like skinny white fighters.
Yeah. And what's funny is like, I don't know if I'm just like, everyone thinks I have a doppelganger, and I know we're getting sidetracked here. I swear to God, I pulled in, this was like years ago. I pulled into a Wendy's. I was with my wife, and this like 16-year-old girl starts freaking out at the counter, and she's like, "Oh my God, are you so-and-so from Teen Wolf?" And I was like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And she like called her friends over, and they're like, "It looks like so-and-so from Teen Wolf." I was like, "Okay." And then like last week, this dude around here is like, "You look just like this French guy I know." And he pulled up the photo and showed it to me today. Dude looks nothing like me. So I don't know. Apparently I just look like a lot of people. But yeah, so if you see any doppelgangers from me, then definitely let me know. But yeah, we can get back on track here and move on. The chat's getting out of hand, so we'll move on to the next fight.
It's midday on a Thursday. People are antsy, and I'm happy that they're all in here. It makes it a lot more fun. I love when we do the live shows. I love when everyone comes out, supports. It's awesome. Let's move on to our next fight, though, and get a little bit, reel it back in, get back on track here. We got Jordan Williams, minus 170, $8,700 against Mickey Gall, who comes back, plus 145, $7,500 for Mickey Gall. And this is an interesting fight because I just do not want to bet on either guy, John. I mean, Jordan Williams was not so impressive in his fight against Imavov that we referenced earlier. And he's moving down in weight, which I actually think is pretty interesting to talk about here. So Jordan Williams historically has not cut weight because he's a type 1 diabetic. So he's weighed in. I'm going to double check what he's weighed in at. But basically he was fighting up at 145 pounds and he was weighing in at like 181, 182 pounds. In the Mavov fight, he came in 182 for the 185 limit. He's fighting at 170 this weekend. Historically, he hasn't been able to cut weight. He's basically said, like, since he signed with the UFC and has all their like nutritionists and facilities around, he's able to cut weight now and thinks he's going to be able to make 170. I just think it's kind of interesting because his cardio didn't look good against Imavov, and now he certainly won't be as undersized for the weight class, but, you know, cutting weight is not easy to begin with. And then put on top of it, it's someone who is a diabetic who has not cut weight in the past. I think it's an interesting thing to look at for weigh-ins. I'm never a big weigh-in guy. I know some people like love and like the weigh-ins and make bets based off how people look. That ain't me. But I am kind of intrigued as to like what goes on with the weight cut for Jordan Williams. And then on the other end, we have Mickey Gall, who, man, I don't know. I'm running out of like nice things to say about Mickey Gall because he goes out there against Mike Perry and basically got like grapple fucked for periods of time. And I think Michael Perry is a better grappler than he is striker. But I mean, if Gall isn't able to out grapple you, his hands are like pretty terrible. And I think that's kind of what it comes down to against Williams. You know, we haven't seen Williams put on his back a bunch. We saw him shoot takedowns on Imavov a bunch, just got stuck in that guillotine that I mentioned. He did stuff a bunch from Imavov. He stuffed 7 of 8 takedowns in that fight. So I think Gall is going to need to wrestle to win here. But at the same time, Jordan Williams isn't a great striker. He might be dealing with a difficult weight cut. It's just hard for me to like, I'm definitely not betting Williams at minus 170. So I think there might be value on Gall plus 145. But it is so hard to be like, oh, yeah, I want to bet Mickey Gall this weekend. I can't do it. The guy just has very limited skill set and is not even that good at what he is theoretically good at, which was a terrible way to describe that. But I think people who have watched him fight before understand what I mean. It's a limited skill set. And when even that one skill set does not have that high of a ceiling in order in terms of winning fights. So, yeah, the UFC desperately wanted Mickey Gall to be a thing. I do not think he's going to end up being a thing. But maybe he comes out here and gets the upset win this weekend. John, do you have any strong takes on this fight? Anything that could kind of push me in one direction, maybe for DFS purposes? Because I just don't really know how to handle this one.
Yeah, you said you're running out of nice things to say about Mickey Gall. I thought you were very nice because I just think he sucks. Like, yeah. He's not good. Like, and coming into the week, I'm like looking at the line, I'm like, Mickey Gall dog. I was like, that's kind of interesting because I don't think Jordan Williams is that good. And then I'm like thinking to myself, but I'm pretty sure Mickey Gall sucks. And then going back and watching some of his fights, I'm like, yeah, there's no way I'm betting Mickey Gall here because like you said, you know, he's supposed to be a grappler. I guess he's an okay grappler. Not really great at getting the fight where it needs to be. But the cardio to me is the biggest thing. Like he has terrible cardio. And now, like you said, against Jordan Williams, who's a much better striker, much more powerful, much more likely to finish. If Mickey Gall gasses out here, like he's getting knocked out. It's as simple as that. I guess, you know, maybe early on in the fight, if he lands a takedown or something, maybe he can make it interesting. But it's Pepe says they're trying to lob Williams a softball. It certainly kind of feels like that. But, you know, I don't know if Gall has like one fight left on his contract. So, I mean, they had to give him a fight too. So they're probably just like, all right, we'll give it to Jordan Williams and see what happens.
I kind of think I thought they were trying to give Gall a softball, but he's like so bad. He's still plus 145, which kind of describes the matchup, right? If half the people think they're trying to give an easy fight to one fighter and the other half think it's the opposite way around, the case is probably that both fighters are pretty bad.
Yeah. And shout out to Bon Kiki. I don't know if I pronounced that right. I apologize. But he said, Williams 16 out of 18 takedowns defended. Yeah, he's shown pretty decent takedown defense from what I've seen. Jonah talked about the weight cut. You know, he is a type 1 diabetic. So he typically fights at middleweight and doesn't cut any weight. So now apparently his coach said they've been working on this cut for a while. So my guess is he's just walking around lighter. Yeah. So hopefully it's not too drastic. You know, you never want to see anybody have any sort of health scare. So keep an eye on weigh-ins. Hopefully everything's okay. But if the weight looks good, he looks good. I think he probably gets the job done here, but it's a low-level fight. I think there's better spots on the card, but I definitely prefer Williams in terms of the upside for DraftKings.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. We need to play some sort of underdog, and I don't love a lot of them. So Gall, you could talk me into a little bit of Gall at 7.5K. Win likely comes via grappling. He's pretty cheap. I mean, he probably could be the cheapest fighter, and depending on how you're kind of factoring in your builds at the top half of the or at the top of the salary cap, I would say. So he's relatively intriguing as an underdog. And with Williams, I'll probably just get underweight a little bit. I mean, I think he'll probably hit decently hard for 170, but he's KO reliant in terms of a DFS score. And I don't know. I don't put a lot of faith into Mickey Gall's like striking defense, but there's a couple of fighters towards the top who like I'm trying to pay for Sijara Eubanks because I think she'll be massively underowned and she's 9.3K. So I can't really be spending 8.7K on fighters who I think like desperately need a knockout, and it isn't super likely that it happens. So we talked a bunch about this fight. It was relatively low level. Let's talk about a high level fight. We got Miranda Maverick minus 150, $8,400 against Maycee Barber, plus 130 for Maycee, 7.8K for her. John, I see you shadow boxing already. I saw a good tweet thread out of you earlier this week at John Kelly DFS over there on Twitter. Talk to me about this fight because I know you got a big bet on it.
Yeah, I really like Maycee Barber here. I think, it's hard to justify Maverick being a favorite, even though it's only a small favorite. I think this is at worst a pick'em fight, but I would actually favor Maycee Barber. She's somebody who I know coming into the UFC, I'm going to be the youngest champ ever, whatever. I don't think anybody was really buying into that. But I do think she's kind of being undervalued here just due to recency bias, and it's not that Miranda Maverick has looked bad. She's looked pretty good in the UFC, but this is clearly the toughest test for her, in my opinion. She's never faced anybody that hits as hard as Maycee Barber does. She's never faced anybody as physical as Maycee Barber. And Barber, through her first 3 fights, got the knockout, looked great. I know she was losing the JJ Aldrich fight. I mentioned that in the Twitter thread that you mentioned. She just has that fight-changing power. Even losing that first round to JJ Aldrich, who is a good boxer, by the way. It's not like she's a bum. So she was losing that fight, and then you saw in the second round, she landed that one big punch, and it was instantly the fight had changed from that point. Like, she just has a way to do that in a lot of her fights. So seeing her as an underdog when she always has that fight-changing power in her back pocket, that alone gets me interested. But also, I just think she's a better striker than Miranda Maverick. I think she's going to move forward. I expect her to win the clinch battles as well. And I think people are just expecting Maverick to be able to come in here, land takedowns, and just dominate the wrestling. I would be pretty surprised. Maverick doesn't have that good of wrestling. I know she landed a few takedowns against Jillian Robertson, but we've seen time and time again now from Jillian that, girls that are just stronger than her, the Talia Santos fight comes to mind. Like, she'll flop to her back, like she'll get taken down. Like, that's not that impressive to me. What would impress me is if Miranda Maverick comes out here and takes down a fighter like Maycee Barber, who is strong, who is tough, and just I just don't. I think she's too physical, too strong. I just don't get why she's an underdog here. I think she's better on the feet, better technical boxer, more power. I think she has more finishing upside, and I actually think her grappling is underrated as well. In that fight against Roxanne Modafferi, obviously she blew out her ACL, but even with the ACL injury, she reversed Modafferi twice with a torn ACL. Like, she knows what she's doing on the ground, and she's tough. Like, if Maverick takes her down, I think reversals are live in this fight. And I know Alexa Grasso looked pretty good, but I think Alexa Grasso's ground game improvements are underrated as well. So it's just one of those things where I just think it's a lot of recency bias. And I think we're getting a good underdog spot now on a fighter that I'm still really high on. She's very young, very improving. And the last thing I'll say is, in that Alexa Grasso fight, I thought she looked in much better shape coming off the injury. Like, you go back and watch her first few fights, she was always a little bit fluffy. And going into that Grasso fight, like, she looked like she was in great shape. And I think that's why her cardio was on point. I think she has a cardio advantage in this fight as well, and I think that'll play out as well. So a lot of reasons why I like Maycee Barber here. I think she has more upside as well, but I think you could target Maverick if you expect the takedowns to be there, the control time. It's just I don't. So I favor the underdog here, but let me hear your thoughts, Jonah.
Yeah, I've heard you, who I consider to be like the smartest person that I talk about MMA consistently with, and other people, my boy John Stargarian, who's been on the show before. A lot of people are all over Maycee Barber in this spot, and I get the reasons why. I mean, just generally looking at the market in the past to see how high the market was on Maycee Barber at one point. And then it's kind of gone downhill to the point where she's an underdog to a girl with 2 UFC fights. I just don't think Maycee has as many skills outside of the one punch KO power. And I know that she carries that. And honestly, hitting super hard and being physical at 125 pounds, which is a super weak division, like Maycee Barber's probably a top 10 fighter for the next decade at that weight class. And I mean, she has upside. She's still young. She is getting better. I know there's moments that are funny that we make fun of, like the shadow boxing from halfway across the octagon. That was one of my favorite tweets of yours. But like, she has these moments, but in general, she's 23 years old. I mean, we think about it, and you said not a lot of us really bought into the youngest champ ever. Like, yeah, that's fair. But there was also a way to look at her and be like, oh, she's going to get a title shot, and she'll probably be a massive underdog to Shevchenko, and she needs to win a fight or two to get there. But at the same time, like, it's such a weak weight class, and she has this one skill that not a lot of fighters have at that weight class, that I think she's going to be able to make it work, especially if her game improves to become like an actually talented, well-rounded fighter. The thing that I see here is she's running into a fighter who I view pretty similarly. Like, I think Miranda Maverick is good. I think she's probably a better grappler in the technical sense. I think she's a better wrestler, probably has better jiu-jitsu as well. And she's pretty big. She hits hard. She's very hittable. I will say that, right? Like, I think Maycee has proven more fight-ending power. I know Maverick has that knockout over Joe Jua. That was a doctor stoppage. And to be fair, I mean, she was putting quite the pace on Joe Jua. She had her cut bad. She was on her way to a normal TKO. However, she was getting lit up in the first minute of that fight, and I don't want to put too much stock into it because she was 22, 23 years old at the time, UFC debut. It's her first minute in the octagon, but Jojo is not someone that should be piecing you up. So if she walks into the pocket and is just getting lit up by Maycee Barber, she's going to lose the fight. But I think she deserves to be a favorite here. If she can mix in her wrestling, I think she has some takedown upside. I think the striking is competitive in terms of the volume. Like, Maycee Barber she hits hard. She throws a decent amount when she has fighters hurt, but she doesn't always put punches together. And I know she has a ton of finishing instinct. Like, I do think Maycee Barber has a high ceiling. At this point in their career, I think Miranda Maverick's a better fighter than her, just straight up. And I think Miranda Maverick is just as high a ceiling as well. And I mean, that feels like a hot take compared to the people I'm talking to, and the people I trust their opinions about. But obviously, in terms of the betting market, it's not. Is there maybe some recency bias here? Sure, like Miranda Maverick's looked good. She beat Jillian Robertson her last fight out. Like, if Maycee Barber let's say Maycee Barber loses to Alexa Grasso in 2019 and then knocked out Jillian Robertson in her last fight, and the order of her fights were reversed, would she be plus 130 here? Probably not. But there's not a big enough edge for me to really bet it when I think that Maycee Barber is like big minute reliant in women's MMA, and she hits hard. She has finishing upside. I just think that like Miranda Maverick also hits hard, and she is super strong for the weight class as well. I just think this is not a great matchup for Maycee. But really, these are two fighters who I think have high ceilings. So I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be a good, a competitive scrap for sure. And I'm looking forward to it. And I'll be rooting for Maycee. Like, all my boys are on her. So I don't bet on the fight. I should for sure be rooting for her. But I think I'm going to pick Miranda to get it done this Saturday. Anything to add here before we move on to our next fight, John?
No, I appreciate your breakdown there. It brought up some really good points. It's interesting to me because I'm pretty sure you backed her against Grasso, right?
Maycee?
I think you backed her against Alexa Grasso. And yeah, I just think that because you brought up the matchup, I actually think this is a better matchup for her than that fight, because I think Grasso's just a better technical boxer and she's so quick with the hands. And that's what gave Maycee so many problems is Grasso just beat her to the punch. Maycee's loading up on these big shots and Grasso's just quick enough to land multiple shots by the time Maycee lands one. I don't think Maverick is technical enough or has the speed on the feet to hang with her. But definitely it's a matchup that I think we're both kind of high on both prospects. I think they both have bright futures. But last thing before we move on, Pepe said, I really think Maverick wins the clinch situations, and the big advantage for Maverick is her ability to blend her limited skill set where Barber lacks fight IQ and ability to blend. And those are all fair points. I think this is why fights like this are so fun, and fight cards like this, because there are close and competitive fights where we can look at the same things and come away with two different opinions and then watch how it plays out on Saturday. So these are the fights that I get really excited about. That's why I spent more time on it, the Twitter thread, and we've gone back and forth here a little bit. But I think, needless to say, we're all very excited to see two high-level prospects duke it out on Saturday.
Yeah, and I don't really think Maverick has that limited of a skill set. Like, I think she's pretty well-rounded for being age 23. I mean, she was a jiu-jitsu fighter at first. She's a high-level BJJ player. Her wrestling has come a long way since watching her regional tape, and she hits decently hard. Like, she isn't the most fluid striker in the world, but I do think she has a more well-rounded skill set than Maycee. I went back and looked at it. You're right. I bet Maycee plus 150 against Alexa Grasso. I also looked. She closed minus 117 and lost, and
yep.
That sucks. Yep. So, yeah, that sucked. And I think, honestly, probably where I was most wrong in that fight, I didn't go back and watch it this week, but was the speed factor. And I do think that there's a chance she's the faster fighter in this matchup, which you talked about. Against Alexa, she was clearly a step slower. Like, Alexa Grasso improved her wrestling defense for sure, even had some offensive wrestling success in that fight. But it comes down to the speed here. And I do think that Barber probably hits harder in the pocket and is probably faster than Maverick. I just think Maverick blends all the different aspects of MMA together just a little bit better. But yeah, fun scrap. Let's move on to the next one. We got Darrick Minner minus 150 here, 8.6K against Darren Elkins, who's plus 130, 7.6K. For Elkins, we are fans of Darrick Minner on the show. He's been on the show before, cashed on him against TJ Laramie. The Charles Rosa fight we also made some money on as well. He comes in small favorite against Darren Elkins, who's been around a long time, would seem to have a ground game that would be able to compete with Minner's, just looking at this fight kind of from a macro point of view. But I'm curious, John, how do you break it down? Because we know Minner historically has been that guy who he's KO1 or bust, they say. And, he can only go out there with an early finish. But in the Charles Rosa fight, he wins a decision and a pretty dominant one at that. And then Darren Elkins, historically, I mean, he's a great wrestler, looked great in his last performance, but he certainly appears to be, at least to me, on the back end of his career, and I have trouble backing guys like that, but certainly the more proven fighter here at plus 125. What are your thoughts on Minner versus Elkins?
Yeah, this is tough, man, because Minner is obviously a submission specialist. I know he looked to have a little bit better cardio. He was able to wrestle for 3 rounds against Charles Rosa, but he's not going to be able to do that against Darren Elkins. And that's the biggest thing for me, is that Darren Elkins, comes from a Division II college wrestling background, Division II or Division III. He's a good wrestler, like, no doubt about it. Even showed it off as recently as his last fight. And I know Eduardo Garagori is like a terrible defensive grappler, but still, he landed 7 takedowns in that fight. Like, he's always had good wrestling. I doubt that Minner's going to be able to come in there and land multiple takedowns. And if he does, I think he's going to gas out. I favor Darren Elkins' cardio. I've given Elkins a lot of shit on this show before. I refer to him as a punching bag a lot because, let's be honest, he is in a lot of his fights. They call him damage for a reason, because he takes so much damage to the head. But Darrick Minner just doesn't have the skill set to really give him problems, in my opinion. Like, Minner's not much of a striker, and Minner sort of needs to be in the grappling realm. And against Elkins is probably a better positional grappler, in my opinion. He's a better wrestler. So it's just like, I find it hard to see how Minner wins minutes here. So you're kind of banking on Elkins just being completely shot, and maybe Minner surprises him with the submission. But I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but has Elkins ever been submitted, or was he submitted once, 10 years ago or something, by Charles Oliveira, I think?
Yeah, Bronx subbed him 11, 12 years ago. That's it.
Okay.
That's the only time.
Yeah. And that he's literally the best grappler at 155, Now small little Darrick Minner is going to come in there and surprise him with something. I love Darrick Minner. Like you said, he cashed that huge TJ Laramie first round sub ticket for us. He'll always have a good spot in both of our hearts and our wallets. But this is a dog spot for me on Darren Elkins. I didn't play him. I'm still kind of should I play him? Because I do think he wins, but I think this type of fight, he is an aging veteran. clearly lost a step. Like, there are some concerns with him. He's not a lock by any means, and that's why I didn't bet him. But I think these are spots where I'd prefer to get exposure on DraftKings, because we have an underdog who I think wins, who probably wrestles. You know, he has some upside. So I think he's a pretty decent salary saver this week.
Yeah, so I think in terms of DraftKings, I'll just start with that. I think Elkins at 7.6K makes a lot of sense because there's going to be a ton of grappling in this fight. Really, no matter who wins, I think we could all agree on that. Like, this isn't one of those fights that we're going to look at and it becomes like, sometimes when we have two high-level wrestlers or grapplers, it turns into a low-level kickboxing fight. I just don't really see that happening here. Both guys are just so willing to go out there and force grappling sequences. Minner especially, like Minner doesn't get hit on the feet. I was just looking at his statistics before we went live. He gets hit like 1.5 times per minute, which is a great metric. But the reason for that is because so much of his fights are on the ground, whether it be him pulling guard or just shooting takedowns in bulk. And then obviously the Rosa fight, he had like 15 minutes of top control, which makes up the majority of his actual minutes spent in the octagon. So that skews some of the stats. So I think Elkins makes sense as a dog on DraftKings. However, I think I'm gonna pick Minner in this spot. I just think that Elkins at this point he's old, man. Like, he's 37 years old, and I have a lot of trouble backing these older fighters who have clearly lost a step. Like, it's not one of those things with Elkins where you look at him and it's like, oh, it could go downhill soon. Like, bro, it's like it's been gone downhill. Like, he got knocked down against Ryan Hall twice. And I know we like Ryan Hall on the show, and Ryan Hall has an underrated kicking game. You shouldn't get knocked down twice against Ryan Hall. Like, his kicking game is to keep distance and to win some minutes that he isn't flopping around on the ground doing somersaults. And Elkins like got caught like flush with a head kick. And I know some of that comes from, he's not expecting that from Ryan Hall. But like, Darrick Minner swings as hard as he can on the feet. He dropped Charles Rosa his last time out. And I know that Elkins historically is the damage because he takes so much damage but keeps going. But at some point that catches up with you at age 37. Like, you can't just keep getting knocked down and hurt in literally every single fight. And it's a good matchup for him in the regard that Minner, yeah, he hits hard, but he's not like a striker specialist. Like, you put Elkins in there against someone who like really cracks at 145, and he's going to be in big trouble in terms of the durability. But I think Minner beats him on feet standing. Like, Elkins just looks so washed in the standing range to me. And yeah, he looked great wrestling in his last fight. And I do think that there's a chance he's a better positional wrestler than Minner, but Minner's going to attempt a ton of submissions here. I actually think something that might provide value is I think I saw a fight to end by submission at plus 190. Our boy Lags the Capper tweeted that out. I mean, the guys are going to attempt submissions on the ground. Historically, in a massive sample, Elkins attempts 1.2 submissions per 15 minutes. And Minner's a small sample, but I think one that we could certainly gather some data from is 3.5 submission attempts for 15. I mean, these guys are just going to be yanking on limbs and necks on the ground for the full 15 minutes or as long as it goes. So I think playing a form of the under there, like 2 fights ago, we were always playing Darrick Minner unders. He was the under guy. And then he goes out there against Charles Rosa, who has historically been very content to just lie on his back for long periods of time and get controlled as long as he doesn't get submitted. Like, Charles Rosa is an anti-under, and he made it lose for Darrick Minner. But all of a sudden, like, the under opened at like plus 145 this week. Limits were super low, so I wasn't able to get down on it. I'm going to double check what the number is at now for the under 2.5 in this spot. Yeah, okay, wow. So it opened plus 165. It's now down to plus 100. Damn, I wish I had just taken like the $200 or whatever they let me get untracked on that under originally. But like, I think ends by sub at plus 190 is almost just as good as the under, because yeah, there's a chance someone wins by positional TKO, Minner gasses out and just kind of gets beaten up on the ground, or Elkins' chin issues catch up to him and he finally gets hit clean. But I think there's gonna be a ton of submission attempts and a fight that sees a ton of grappling. So I like fight to end by submission plus 190. I might actually bet that as my third spot of the week. Anything else here on Minner versus Elkins, John? Or are we good to move on to our featured bout?
No, I think we're good to move.
All right, sick. All right, 3 more fights left to go. Let's kick it off here. We got Kyler Phillips minus 265 at this point, $9.2 thousand against Howley and Paiva. Comes back plus 225 at $7,000 for Paiva on DraftKings. And John, I'll let you go first here because I was expecting to get on the show and you're going to talk to me about how Paiva could be an undefeated fighter. Things have gone a little differently, and he was robbed versus Kai Kara France, and there was a cut stoppage against Bontorin earlier in his career as well. However, I pull up the bets tracker. I see Kyler Phillips money line and a parlay. Talk to me about this spot, because I actually think I kind of see value in Paiva as a plus 200 underdog. You obviously see it the other way and are the only one to have a bet on the fight. So yeah, I'll kick it off with you.
Yeah, that was a pretty good impersonation. I've mentioned that in like every Julian Paiva fight of all time. I think I've led with those.
And he's had a couple of fights canceled. So like I've heard it like 3 or 4 times since he actually last fought.
I mean, it's true though. Like he got robbed against Kai Kara France. The cut stoppage against Bontorin was bullshit. Like he was winning that fight, like without the cut stoppage there.
Like a minute in, but yeah.
I mean, he had him hurt. Like I don't know. I think, and you run it back, like he wins that fight almost every single time. Bontorin's a bum, let's be honest. But he's another dude that needs to move up to 135, right? Like did he? Did he fight at 135?
Well, Bontorin's missed weight before. I think he might have moved up in his last fight. Regardless.
Yeah, because he missed weight by like 8 pounds or something crazy.
Paiva's moving up in this fight to 135.
Yeah, so that's why I bring it up. Paiva's finally moving up to 135. And I think that's the right move for him here. But where he had some of his advantages at 125 was because he was so much bigger. And even with that size advantage, he at times didn't really do enough with it. Kyler Phillips is somebody that I think is like pretty damn good. He's very well-rounded. He's powerful on the feet. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, been training jiu-jitsu his whole life. And he'll land takedowns. We saw it against Song Yadong, landed multiple takedowns there, was able to control him at least partially. Early on, not so much, but later as the fight went on. But I just think he's a better fighter than Julian Paiva. Like Paiva can make it somewhat competitive on the feet, but I expect Phillips to throw more volume, and I expect Phillips to land the heavier shots. Paiva's never really been a power guy. He's more of a decision fighter, doesn't really have knockout power. He's an okay grappler, but I think Phillips is just better there as well. I just think Phillips has him beat in pretty much every area, and Paiva's been used to just being the longer, bigger fighter at 125, and now he's going up against somebody that's going to be bigger and stronger than him, and what I think better in every area of martial arts than him as well. So I think you can maybe take some shares of Paiva on DraftKings if you think maybe he wins like a competitive based decision. But like I really don't even see the upside for him here. I think all the upside is on the Phillips side, and I actually think he has a little bit of a chance to finish as well.
Yeah, so I love that you mentioned the upside here, because earlier on in the week, I was looking at the fight and I thought, Paiva's moving up in weight. I think he's a decent fighter. I don't spend 20 minutes talking about how he should be undefeated, but like I do think that Paiva is a pretty decent fighter. And Kyler Phillips, I thought Kyler was super impressive in that Song Yadong fight. I mean, he was an underdog, came out there, wrestled successfully. A little bit of a sketchy third round at some points, but that was the first like really actually difficult opponent that he's faced, and I thought he passed the test with relative ease, I would say. Like he looked better than I expected him to, but this number just seemed inflated against Paiva. And then I dove into it a little bit more, and I think that Paiva's upside is like a close split decision sort of deal. Yeah. Because, I mean, the way he fights is he's long, and I know he likes to go out there and pressure, but he doesn't really offensively wrestle. He actually has a negative striking differential, meaning he gets hit more than he hits his opponent, which I was not expecting. I kind of looked into it, and like, I mean, it makes sense. Like he was going tit for tat with Mark De La Rosa, for fuck's sake, for like 10 minutes in that fight. Like it was not a good look. And I mean, obviously he got the knockout win, the Zumagulov fight. I thought he was almost fortunate to get that decision actually in his last time out. So with Paiva, it feels like his upside is like a close split decision. And with Kyler, it feels like I think he slows down late in fights for sure, but he's going to push a pretty rapid pace for the first 2 rounds at least. And he has wrestling upside, and Paiva isn't going to be that super long guy anymore. I mean, Kyler Phillips is long for 135 pounds. Like I think this is the right weight class for Paiva. I'm not saying he's undersized, but it's tough to move up a weight class and then be fighting someone who's big at the weight class you're moving up to. Like Kyler's big for 135. He's especially long. He has a reach advantage in this fight. So I think that Phillips can win this fight in more ways than one. Deserves to be a favorite. Is minus 265 wide? Probably. Am I playing Sijara Eubanks over him on DraftKings? For sure I am, at 9.3K versus 9.2, especially because I think Phillips might see similar ownership, and I'm pretty happy to go with Eubanks there. But I do think that Kyler gets the job done. I think he wins this fight It could be close, but I think I think he's better than Paiva in a lot of the different aspects of MMA, and Paiva's upside is just so limited to that close split decision against fighters at this level. All right, let's move on to our co-main event. You have one thing to add, John?
I was just going to say, because I didn't really state it, but that's the last part of parlay for me, was Eubanks money line, Costa Yanez fight does not go the distance, and Kyler Phillips money line. If you parlay them together, plus 135 is the number I got on FanDuel, and that's for 1.5 units, because those are like the 3 most confident outcomes for me for this entire card.
Yeah. Yo, I just peeped Sijara Eubanks' Instagram story. She's going to make 125 tomorrow. She's looking ripped. She's going to make it. I ain't worried about it. I was a little worried. I ain't going to lie. I DM'd her on Instagram. I was like, yo, Sarge, like, how's the weight cut going? She didn't respond.
Yo, Sarge, go for that sub. Plus 500. GG.
Well, I might DM her that on Saturday. I just need her to focus on making weight first. So the fight doesn't get canceled. But she looks good, which is a good thing, because I was a little bit nervous about that. Moving down, historically, she's been like hospitalized the last time she tried to make 125 pounds. Yeah. But okay, yeah, that's good. Let's get back on track here. Co-main event, we got Aspen Ladd against Maycee Chiasson. Ladd minus 195. Come back on Maycee Chiasson as the underdog is plus 165. $8,900 for Ladd on DK, 7.3K for Maycee. This is another fight, John, where I looked at it earlier in the week and I was like, you want to know what? This line might be a little bit wide. Like, Ladd kind of gets by on being super physical and bodying girls, but then Maycee Chiasson's like 6 foot at 135 pounds. But I dove into it more, and I mean, I think that Ladd is going to probably come out here and whoop her. I mean, we watched Marion Renault last week against Miesha Tate just look terrible, and that win for Maycee, which was very competitive for long periods of it, or throughout the first 2 rounds at least, that win has aged like milk. Like, that aged terribly. I thought, okay, she got by Marion, she's a tough vet, but then Marion came out and looked so bad in her next fight that like Maycee really should have gone out there and just totally done a number on her. And then she beat Shayna Young, who doesn't have a UFC win, and then her last win before that was Sarah Moras, who's cut from the division. Gina Mazzani, who is Gina Mazzani, like, she came back, got a win, but has cardio issues and struggles in extended fights. Then she beat Panny Kianzad, which is a good win. I think we know what Maycee is. Like, she hits hard. She's a decent cage pushing game. She's decent on top. But with Aspen Ladd, I mean, I don't love Ladd. Like, a lot of people thought she's for sure a title competitor, and I know 135 is not the deepest division in the world. I bet against her. I cashed with GDR against her with that kind of early stoppage in the first minute of that main event a few years ago. But she came out here against Yana in her last fight, and I mean, it was relatively competitive. I think it was 2-0 on 2 scorecards and 1-1 on another scorecard against Yana. But she came out there and dropped her early in the third and put her away. I mean, Ladd is a lethal top control fighter for any division in MMA. I mean, she gets on top and you're in serious trouble. And she's reliable to shoot takedowns. Maycee has historically not been a great defender of takedowns at just 65%. So, I mean, I think Ladd comes out here and either hits her in the face really hard over and over again or takes her down and pounds her out. Am I laying the chalk on Ladd at minus 200? Probably not, but I do think that she deserves to be a pretty massive favorite. And it is a strong play on DraftKings at 8.9K. If you like TJ Dillashaw in the main event, which we'll get to in a second, and I know you personally don't, John, but just in general, like if you're going down and you're playing Dillashaw at 7.4K and you're playing Elkins at 7.6K, and you're not playing Sandhagen at the top, who's a favorite in the main event, you could play like Ladd and Eubanks, I think, project as 2 of the highest scoring fighters on this slate, just kind of in general. So those are my thoughts on the fight. I think Ladd comes out here and smashes Maycee Chiasson. John, you agree, or you got a different take here on the underdog?
No, I really don't have much to add on this one. I have always been pretty high on Aspen Ladd. No reason to stop now. There was a brutal weight cut against Jermaine Duran to me. Back when that fight happened that you mentioned, looked good in the rebound against Yana Kunitskaya, and the weight seemed fine for that fight. So I'm expecting it to be under control for this week as well. The only thing that not even worries me, but like you said, Maycee Chiasson is just going to be way bigger. She's going to be 6 inches taller. Aspen Ladd's only I don't know. She's pretty short.
She's 5'6". That is the one reason
Maycee's going to be tall.
Right. That's why
she's 5'11".
I think Maycee's 5'11 and Aspen's 5'6. I could double check.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I'm not laying the chalk is because Aspen is so like power reliant and she's going to be way smaller. At least, I mean, I think physically she's just as strong as Maycee. I think they're both pretty powerful, but like just the visual of needing this like 5'6" girl to go out there and absolutely smash someone a foot taller than her is kind of hard to visualize, even though I think it's likely to happen, if that makes sense.
No, I'm right there with you. And so, I mean, I think Aspen Ladd wins here. I think Maycee Chaston's just not somebody that I think is all that talented. You know, she was exposed by, who was it? Lena Landsberg, I want to say, back in the day, a couple years ago. And like, not to get all MMA math, but Aspen Ladd like cut through her. Like it wasn't even, you know what I mean? Like, I just think it's going to be similar. Like, I think Aspen Ladd is a cardio machine. She's literally hiking like 50 miles every day. If you follow her on Instagram with her dogs, she could literally she could fight for like 50 minutes as long as the weight cut is on point. So I trust her to do more. I think she's going to be more likely to finish here. I think the fight will hit the ground at some point, and I think Aspen Ladd's the one to take it there. I think she winds up in that top position and probably finishes with ground and pound. So yeah, she's a good play on DraftKings as always. So I think we can move on to the main event unless you have anything else to add.
I just am like slowly talking myself into laying it with Aspen at -200. You know, like the idea of her being way smaller is kind of hard to visualize. But if she looks good on the scale tomorrow, because she has scuffled in previous weight cuts before, as you mentioned, if she looks good tomorrow, like I really think she should go out there and kind of dominate Maycee. So yeah, I might be laying two -200 favorites on this card in the women's MMA. So if they both lose, you can find me in a ditch somewhere in Boulder, Colorado. After that happens. So let's move on to our main event of the evening. We got Corey Sandhagen, -200 favorite, $8,800 on DraftKings against TJ Dillashaw, +170 for TJ, $7,400. John, a lot of narratives. I wrote about it in my main event write-up already over at ftnbets.com. These guys previously were training partners at Elevation Fight Team in Denver. There have been rumors that Corey got the best of TJ. I usually don't buy into like a narrative-y stuff, but there are clips of TJ saying that he's gotten his ass kicked by Corey. There's people who have been in the gym there before. Dan Hooker spent some time there, and on his podcast, he was saying how he went there and he saw that Corey was not even a pro fighter. He was 2-0 as a professional at that point in time. And he was like doing a number on TJ in the gym sort of deal. And I don't put a ton of stock into narratives. I don't really listen to what fighters say. Like fighters fight. They don't like, I'm not listening to them for like fight analysis sort of deal. But like, it seems to me like the narrative between these two guys competing against each other in the gym was that it was pretty even years ago. And that was before Sandhagen made the UFC. And now the guy's top 5 in the weight class. TJ Dillashaw is coming off a 2-year suspension for EPO. He's 35 years old, probably needs to win this fight to have a realistic chance to ever get his title back at 135 pounds. I'll let you go first because I know Corey Sandhagen is your boy. I know you have a bet on him this weekend. So I'm just kind of interested, like, how do you see the fight playing out? And yeah, talk us through your bets on Sandhagen.
Yeah, I think it's funny that the, former training, who got the best of who has been like the talk of everybody this week, when like, I don't even get why it's that surprising to anybody or anyone that wants to dispute it. Like for my money, Corey Sandhagen's the best striker in the division, like by far. Like, I think he's the best striker in the bantamweight division. I don't even think that's a hot take. Like, he literally is so good. Like, he's compared to, they compare him to Dominic Cruz all the time with his footwork. His footwork is so good, managing distance, managing range. He's just next level. All the weapons that he has, good jab. He's got the spinning shit. He throws a lot of flying knees, which he lands a lot. He dropped Mario Batista back in the day with it. He landed it flush on John Lineker like 2 or 3 times. And obviously the Frankie Edgar knockout, like that is a serious weapon that he likes to look for. And if he can time it right against somebody that's going to shoot for takedowns like TJ Dillashaw, then I think he has a good chance to knock him out. And it's not just that, the knee, it's everything. Like, if this fight plays out on the feet, I think Corey Sandhagen is going to be throwing more volume. I think he's going to be landing more. And I think he just has much better durability and cardio. And that's really all it comes down to. All that other stuff about TJ, like the 2-year USADA suspension, hasn't fought in 2.5 years, possible ring rust, now 35 years old. Like, that's obviously concerns, but like even putting that to the side, like that just adds to why I would favor Corey Sandhagen in a striking match. Now, on the flip side, like you said, I know you don't like TJ Dillashaw. So on DraftKings, I totally get it. Like you have an underdog in the main event, which, you know, from a macro sense, game theory wise, that's from a strategy standpoint, that's just smart a lot of times to just take the underdog in a main event. You know, you get a salary saver, you can build good with the rest of your lineup, whatever. But also in a win, TJ would have to wrestle here. So you have an underdog whose path to victory involves wrestling. Like I get the play. I'm not saying to fade him. And that's really why I think the line is wide in terms of the money line, because, you know, that's a clear leak in Sandhagen's game. He can't defend takedowns. He puts himself in bad spots regularly on the mat. You know, going back against Alcantara, he was deep in that arm bar. You know, his arm literally popped out, but he didn't tap, reverse, ended up getting a stoppage the next round. You know, against, you can do that against lower level fighters. I think Bautista even had him in something. I can't remember, but then you do that against good grapplers like Aljamain Sterling, and you're going to pay that price. So like if he gives up takedowns and puts himself in bad spots, then TJ could certainly finish him. And TJ hasn't been super aggressive with his wrestling and ground game, hasn't submitted anyone since like 2012, I want to say. Hasn't really proactively wrestled since the John Lineker fight in 2016. So there are reasons why I would caution people that think he's just going to come out and just within 5 seconds, like Curtis Blade style, shoot takedowns. Like TJ has good striking. So, and he's always been confident enough in his striking to where I don't think he's going to be like just coming out and like instantly like, oh, I need to wrestle right away because I am just drawing dead on the feet, even though I think he is drawing dead on the feet. But I don't think that him and his coaches are going to come in with a game plan for him to just aggressively and desperately wrestle right off the rip. And I think he needs to. You know, the last thing I'll say is his durability was a concern for me, you know, going back years. You know, he was rocked in the Lineker fight, rocked multiple times in the Cody Garbrandt fight, in both of those fights. And then the Henry Cejudo fight, like, I mean, he got his brain scrambled with like 25 different headshots. Like, yeah, he's just like, we've seen it time and time again with TJ where the writing's on the wall in terms of his durability. And now coming off 2.5-year layoffs, may or may not no longer be on steroids, like against one of the most dangerous strikers in the division. I just think if the fight plays out for extended periods on the feet, I do think he gets dropped. So that's a long way of saying I bet one unit Corey Sandhagen plus 160 by knockout, because I think that's the most likely outcome here.
Yeah, that's a pretty great number, actually, on Sandhagen by KO. I think you did a great job breaking down the fight. I mean, you pretty much touched on everything. I was so ready to come out here and, you know, have you hype up Corey. And then I was going to ask, you know, what would you say if someone said TJ Dillashaw lands 2 takedowns per 15 minutes, shoots a bunch, and Corey Sandhagen has a 30% takedown defense? And I was ready to ask that, and you covered it. I do think that TJ has a path to victory in this fight. I think it likely comes via wrestling. The first thing I want to touch on is like this guy's ego is too big to come out here and like be shooting on the legs. And you mentioned that. I mean, he's trying to turn this steroid suspension into like some sort of like sob story so people feel bad for him.
It's fucking
like,
ridiculous.
I know some of it is like the UFC just trying to like market the fight. Like this guy like legitimately thinks that like everyone feels bad for him. And like his ego is so big that like I'm the best in the world. I'm 1 win away from getting my title back sort of deal, which theoretically may be true, but like, I don't know. I don't put stock in a fighter interviews, but if you think TJ's coming out here and just like conceding that he's fucked on the feet and he's just going to shoot takedowns in bulk, like I think you're probably in for a rude awakening. I think he has wrestling upside. You know, Sandhagen's takedown defense is certainly not good. I think you mentioned how he puts himself in bad spots, but is a pretty good scrambler to get out unless you like are at the top of the division, like Aljo, who was really able to just put him away once he got into a dominant position. So I see the angle for TJ. But for me, like he's less than a 2-1 underdog, and he has to parlay several different things to have a competitive fight here with Sandhagen, in my opinion. First of all, he's going to need to shoot at least 5 takedowns, most likely, because Sandhagen's not going to get laid on for 10 minutes each or 5 minutes each time he's taken down. He's going to need to shoot a lot of takedowns. He's going to need to not get hurt on the feet, and he's going to need to have the cardio to go for 25 minutes when the guy is 35 years old, hasn't fought in 2.5 years, and is coming off of a steroid suspension that he was probably on his entire career. like there's nothing to point to me like, oh, TJ was at some point he wasn't cheating and then he was cheating. I know he said it was for the weight cut for Cejudo, all that shit. Like I don't believe him about any of it. And so assuming that he's not on steroids anymore, I mean, the guy's an idiot. Like he might be. I really like do not like TJ Dillashaw as a person. If you can't get that from the breakdown here, but just he has to parlay all these things. Like he needs to have not lost a step, no ring rust. He needs to shoot multiple takedowns at a time, and he needs to be competitive on the feet for stretches to win the fight. Like I'm just not getting enough at plus 170. I'm also not laying minus 200 on Sandhagen just because, yeah, like there's the downside that he gets taken down each time that TJ shoots. But at the same time, like KO plus 160 is a pretty good number. I think Corey wins a lot here. I just don't want to lay the chalk on. I don't like laying any number that starts with a minus 200 next to it for a guy with a 30% takedown defense. It's just hard. I've been out looking about Sandhagen. I think is the best 135er in the world. Kind of, got to pull the horses back a little bit after the Aljo fight. I think that'll always be tough stylistically, but I do think he's the hardest fight for Jon in the division. And there's a chance that Jon wrestles him too, but of course he needs to get past TJ this weekend. I think both of us are picking him to do so. That does it for us. That's 12 fights, a little under an hour and a half, all going down this weekend at the Apex. Jon, if you have anything you want to add about the main event, the card in general from DFS or betting perspective, feel free to do so. And if not, take us out of here.
Yeah, I'll just say again, this has pay-per-view vibes to me. I think a lot of people are buzzing this week just because we have so many fun matchups, not just the main event, but some of the other ones we covered as well. So I'm super excited about it. Hopefully you guys are as well. You can find our content up at ftndaily.com, ftnbets.com. And of course, we'll be in our Discord, which is now free. So hop on in there, say what's up. We'll talk through fights and just macro strategy for the DFS slate as well. But that's going to do it, guys, for us. I'm John Kelly. That's Jonah Shiffman. This is the Undisputed MMA show presented by the FTN Network, saying goodbye and good luck. And we will see you guys next time.